Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Who Cares About Justice podcast. I am your host, Mark C. McGuire Sr., and I'm excited about being here today. Remember, the objective of this particular podcast is that we are creating conversation and evolving with empowerment around the experience of inequality, injustice, and inequity of Black Americans in the United States. Yes, that's right. Black, indigenous, and people of color in the United States, and the inequity and injustices that have gone on for so long. Our job here on this particular podcast is to inform, impact, and inspire. We want you to know what you need to know, and then we want to give you ways to respond. I believe that conversation is the impetus to relationships, and relationships should cultivate both action and power. So when we're talking about the plight of Black men in America, we're not being biased because we also understand that this plight also involves women. All the way back during the time of suffrage and even before the 19th Amendment was signed, there was one, Abigail Adams, who believed that slavery was evil and a threat to the American democratic experiment, who also believed that gender justice is associated with racial justice. And she said, "Do not forget the women, for within our hearts also burns a passion for justice." So, ladies, you're not by yourself. We're not leaving you out, but we do understand that there is injustice in America that needs to continually be addressed. And so, what we want to do is during these episodes, we want to take a look at historical data. We want to look at current events. We want to look at real time occurrences. We want to look at marketplace impact and personal stories that will help us understand what we can do to fight against inequality and injustices and inequities and make America a better place for our BIPOC communities. As we continue to champion these cause month after month, we want to come with a cause against the violation of what we call the Imago Dei. And that is the image of God in every human being. Why? Because humanity is a right. And so, as we begin to look at things as it relates to justice in America, one of the things that we have to address is racism. Racism is simply the prejudice, discrimination, and antagonizing acts of one race group over another with superiority, with the ability and attempt, intention, and desire to exclude, oppress, and to be injurious. In other words, it's one racial group using their privilege, their power, their fragility to overwhelm another race group and to keep them oppressed with antagonizing tactics of discrimination and prejudice, and to allow not to allow them to fulfill and see their full potential. So here we are. It's been about a month or so, and we're dating back. Slavery and when we come out of slavery, we have had civil rights movements that have made progress, but we continue to see that there's a need for the fight. So when we go back and we talk about slavery, we talk about white fragility, we talk about white privilege, we talk about white supremacy. We're talking dating back to the Three-Fifth Compromise of 1787. We're talking about the 19th century when the Reconstruction era came into play with the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, and as I mentioned, the 19th Amendment. We're talking about a system that we have to ask the question, is it really broken, or was it built with the intent of prejudice and preferential treatment? Even from a standpoint of law enforcement and judicial systems that were designed as the extension of a system that could not stand against the Reconstruction amendments of the 19th century and would have to disguise the disgust through Jim Crow laws and to put themselves in a position where others would have to come along for the annihilation of those activities and mindsets. So when we think about people like Frederick Douglass, who stood for civil rights, who understood the Constitution, but also understood that blacks were needed or should have been considered citizens. Then we think about Reconstruction too, with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and so many of those that marched in the 60s and fought for our civil rights. Movies like Selma that help us to understand what took place on the bridge and what took place in Alabama and about voting and bringing forth the civil rights Act and reestablishing a Voting Rights Act that was already established back with the 15th Amendment. But for some reason, it had to be reissued, as it were. And then we're talking about this new movement that is taking place right now with diversity, exclusion, and inclusion, and understanding that there's an issue that continues to prevail as it relates to civil rights. And so we are here again at Who Cares About Justice podcast, and we're excited about the information that's going to be given, because we believe that you can't have change when there is no confrontation, and then there will be no confrontation until someone is convicted within. And so month after month, our job is to not only herald this cry for justice, but also to bring individuals on who are expert and championing in this area. We understand that diversity and inclusion is so important. We understand that cultural competency is so important. We understand that understanding where we are in America is so important, and where is it that we need to go. So again, we like to welcome you to the Who Cares About Justice podcast. We want you to visit us on our social media platforms, on our website at caresjustice.org. And we're excited about the initiatives that we're a part of right now. I think last month we talked about the Pardon Project, and we're on the cups of doing something great there in Ohio with the Pardon Project. We've been a part of a lot of initiatives in Georgia and Virginia and Jacksonville, Florida, and Dayton, Ohio, as it relates to votes and voting rights, and making sure that people are overcoming this attempt for voters' oppression. And so we're looking forward to those things that we need to do. And again, on Facebook and Instagram and even Twitter and LinkedIn, we are asking you to visit us on our social media platforms. The number is going across the screen, 855-30-CARES. That's 855-302-2737. And you give us a call, and we can find out what we can do to help you in your local area. And so we're just excited about a national movement as it relates to social justice. And I got a bad wife, and I had a bad mama, and I call them bad mama jammas. And so, with no disrespect, we've had some bad mama jammas on this podcast. But today we're going to have another bad mama jamma. So I mentioned my mom and my wife so that no one would think that I was being disrespectful or not giving homage to the great women of our day and our time. But I'm telling you, when there's someone that's making a pathway, that's on the cutting edge, that's doing some phenomenal stuff, my mama called him a bad mama jamma. And so I want to get you ready for someone that's going to be a blessing to us today, that's looking forward to sharing her experience with us, who's a part of our project and initiative in Dayton, Ohio. We're looking forward to what's going to take place next week. And we're also very thankful to our board president, the Honorable Judge Walter H. Rice, to our vice president, Dr. David Greer, to our treasurer, Dr. Robert Walker, and to all of our board members, Dr. Angela McGuire, Dr. Angela Cottrell, Apostle Arthur McGuire, Mrs. Bonnie Beeman Rice. We're just so thankful for those that have continued to sacrifice time and finances and their own lives to make sure that justice is being served, not only in the Dayton and Montgomery County of Ohio area, but all around our nation. Like we said, we're spreading out in different places and allowing God to just do some amazing things. And so we're excited even about the work here in Jacksonville, Florida, with the Community Safety and Engagement Action Plan and some of the things that are taking place already right here, working with Bays, with the young people and children with our CHAMPS program. That's Colleagues of Hope, Achieving Maximum Potential. And so helping young people come together as colleagues. They've always hooked up as gang members and homies and bros and those that were, in the hood. But now we're trying to bring a professional atmosphere even through the area of peer support. And so we are very thankful and excited about that. We also want to thank all of those that were a part of our Boots on the Ground conference with Twin Cities Recovery Project, with CARES and others as partners and sponsors with that particular project, University of Minnesota, Harvard University, and so many others, Hazelton and others, Faces and Voices of Recovery, just a myriad of great organizations who are looking to do some great things. So once again, we want to say thank you. We want to welcome you to our podcast. Get ready to be informed, impacted, and inspired. Today's guest, Lord have mercy. I mean, just phenomenal individual. I was told to meet this woman when I first was on my way to Jacksonville, Florida. And for whatever reason, I got busy, didn't do it, and I had lost time. But when the time came, God knows perfect timing, we met, my wife and I, we've met an incredible lady, incredible woman of God, but also a woman of power and intelligence and tenure in the area of cultural competency and justice and diversity, equity and inclusion. I think I said that wrong earlier. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we just want to make sure that we are able to introduce her to the platform that we have. And we're looking forward to a longstanding relationship, partnership, and some great things coming. So without further ado, I am going to bring to this podcast Dr. Tammy Hodo. Dr. Hodo is the founder and president of All Things Diverse LLC. She's going to speak more to that and all the things that All Things Diverse is accomplishing. We actually named our podcast today All Things Diverse. What else did we need to name it if you're going to have Dr. Tammy on the podcast? She has a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in urban studies and a minor in sociology with that doctoral degree, specializing in race, class, gender, and ethnicity. She has a Master of Public Administration from Columbus State University and her bachelor's from Albany State University. Don't mess with us. And so we're excited. She has over 18 years of academia experience. She's just a phenomenal lady. Her company has contracted with cities around the state of Florida, Jacksonville, with the Save Her Together project, and even the city of Tampa. She's a publicist. She's, has written. She just writes and researches, and just it blows your mind all the things that she's accomplishing and getting done. And for someone who doesn't even like to read anymore, she's a little scary because, boy, if you're going to pick a subject that she knows something about, you know that she's done her research and she's read up on it. So once again, I want to introduce to all of my friends and all of our colleagues that are in our virtual offices around the world, and just say to you, Dr. Tammy Hodo, first of all, what a privilege, what an honor to be of your acquaintance and to have you on the Who Cares About Justice podcast. Welcome. God bless you.
Thank you, Bishop. It is such a pleasure to be here. You made me blush a little bit. I feel like I'm about some business or something.
You're about way more than some business. I'm gonna tell you. My wife loves you. I mean, I love you. We just think the world of you. We are looking to, and I don't want it to be a one-sided situation. So I'm hoping God will give us something to reciprocate. But we're definitely looking forward to gleaning from your experience, from your knowledge, from your work, and just allowing our lives to be better as we do the work that God has called us to do as well, and what CARES has called us to do. This Community Alliance for Restorative Education and Social Justice is dear to our hearts, and we just believe that God has placed us in this space to do that. So welcome. How has your day been so far on a Monday?
My Monday has been pretty good so far. I taught earlier this morning a 4-hour course to the city of Tampa, working with them on some inclusive cultural training, and other than that, just continuously working and reading and writing and doing all those good things.
Well, listen, we're going to get into this thing, and it's going to get heavy, and we're going to move and groove, and I'm excited about it. But I want you to introduce to us the Tammy Hodo outside of the work. Tell us who you are. I know mother and wife and all that. Give us the insight.
Okay, so I'll start out very transparent. I am the product of an interracial marriage. So my parents married in 1962. I wasn't born during that decade, but they married before Loving versus Virginia. But they married in Wisconsin. And so there are 3 of us. And my mother was, she's a trailblazer. Obviously, back then you just did not marry African American men. She was obviously disowned by her family, which was pretty standard. When the kids started to come, then of course my grandmother changed, and began to come by. But we are originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is the third most segregated metropolitan statistical area in America. I am a product of the public education school system there. Grew up in a predominantly white space, but was very much covered and cloaked in my mother's white privilege. When we needed anything taken care of, my mother did that, and then we kind of appeared after the fact. I went into the U.S. military upon graduating high school because I knew I wasn't ready for college. I was not mature enough. I did 4 years in the Navy, which I had a lot of racialized experiences, and I was not naive to racism, but I didn't realize how embedded it was in institutions. Because again, growing up cloaked in that white privilege, your white mother goes and takes care of everything and she makes it right.
Wow.
And so I went into the Navy, at which point the squadron I belonged to in San Diego, they were still talking about N-rigging things, and had someone call me the N-word, and just had some really bad experiences. But I did my 4 years, got my honorable, and got out. That led me to go to a historical Black college. And the irony of that is my mother, right, the white woman, sent me the list of all the historical Black colleges and universities and said, hey, I taught with your dad, and we think you need to be built back up. Because they worked real hard to build us up because they knew we'd be different, and kind of fitting in anywhere. And so I did. I went to Albany State, proud alum, Albany State University, graduated from there. Ended up marrying my boyfriend in college, who was in ROTC. So he's an Army officer, and traveled the world with him, and just did a variety of career occupations while obtaining my PhD. So, like you said, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a great aunt. I'm a Christian. I love the Lord, but I'm not to be played with. When it comes to issues of social justice, it's like, I call it just like I see it. I know people don't like it. I think I have an interesting insight because you can't tell me that there is a white privilege because I grew up cloaked in it. And so I did a TEDx speak about the social implications of race, and that's what it's entitled, because reality is why you may tell other Black folk, well, no, that's not really how it happens. I grew up in the community. I know how it works. And so I know it to be real, and I've seen it in action. And I've also seen the oppression that has been imposed on BIPOC, on the Black, Indigenous people of color, and how it's systematically done. And it's interesting because you talked about, like, was the structure set up this way? And to me, America was established on the backs, obviously of the indigenous population and Black slaves, but it was set up this way. So it's functioning just as it should. And to me, which is really an effort to keep the cisgendered European American evangelical Christian at the forefront and in those positions of power.
Wow. I mean, in that hello, blew my mind. So, once again, I proved my point. But I do want to make mention of something that I did not mention that you did that is powerful. Your TED Talk was powerful. I loved it. I've watched it 3 times. I learned so much from the TED Talk. In a couple of minutes, could you summarize to us? Because we want to send people to that TED Talk. Give us the title again. And then, of course, people can go through the TEDx or go to YouTube and find it. There's a link that gets us to that. And maybe we'll have that link before we're done. And it'll be in the chat and people can grab that. We can put it on the on a banner. But talk a little bit about that TED Talk and in summation.
So it's called The Social Implications of Race. And what I do is I really trace back the census and how they have designed in different racial categories. And they've decided with the census who should have power and who should not. And so basically how they've changed things. I talk about one slave who was biracial, who sued for her freedom and actually won based off her white father's lineage. And then I talk about, then they implemented the 1-drop rule and just that whole social construct of race in America and how it's been built up. I share, like, when my parents married in the 60s, my father was considered a Negro as per census. And then in the 70s, 70s, he was counted as Black because of the Black Power movement. And then the 80s, he was African American. And nothing about my dad's beautiful dark complexion changed, but the way the government counted and categorized him did. And so I speak about that, and I speak about growing up very much in a white community, cloaked in white privilege, and having very different lived experiences because of that background I come from. And I was able to go back in and do small, great conversations after the murder of George Floyd. So that's also a TEDx talk as well. And that you're able to find that on TEDx Jacksonville. And the first one, you just have to type in the social implications of race, or you can visit my website, All Things Diverse, and I have both TED Talks on there. But it just deals with that social construct of race and how it continues to matter, and how those in the dominant group, many of them don't want to understand because they know that they have privilege. And so equality feels like oppression to them, and so they don't want to be in the same boat with us, but they don't want to acknowledge that racism is very much embedded and ingrained in American institutions.
Wow. I know that just hearing that, they're going to want to get to that. So remember, allthingsdiverse.com. Go there. The links are there. It'll send you to the TED Talk. It'll send you to TED Talk Jacksonville or TEDx Jacksonville. And you're going to get some powerful information. When I heard you talk about in the 60s, categorized as a Negro, and then in the 70s as Black, in the 80s, African American, we just didn't even pay attention to that. And a lot of times, Bill Cosby said, you want to keep stuff away from Black folk, put it on paper. A lot of times we didn't even fill out applications and read and realize that the government was classifying us in different ways, in different spaces for a reason. And It wasn't to appease us. It wasn't to make us feel good, but it was because there was an implication that was going on along with that. And so not even understanding that narrative. And so that's why, once you have that transformation, you get away from certain activities, you ask yourself, why are we hurting each other so much when we've been hurt outside of our own culture, outside of our own socioeconomic classes, outside of our own ethnicity, with really, in some cases, no remorse, by and large. I mean, of course, we have people who feel sorry about it. There is some levels of empathy, and there are some sympathetic individuals. But by and large, when you look at the entire construct, it's like, hey, this is kind of how it happened. And then some people are, to blow it off. And I know you'll deal with it when we talk about bias and microaggression next week. But it's almost like, well, that's not my fault. I wasn't there. I didn't have anything to do with that. And so, but again, living with that supremacy, living with that privilege. And then in cases where I call it escapism, where they want to live with that fragility and act like they can't handle the conversation, it becomes very interesting. So let me ask you this. We've got a little bit of your history, a little bit of your background, but give me the journey. Tell me what vehicle got you to being Dr. Tammy Hodo, All Things Diverse. I know the experience of the privilege, being cloaked in that. I love the way you say that. And then the HBCU experience. How did those things come together and release Dr. Hodo?
So I would say really the Navy is what helped me with my journey. Because had I not experienced that level of racism, institutional at my squadron, I don't believe that I would be where I am today. That's what it made me realize, how much color matters in America and perception. And coming from there and going to the HBCU and having, that's like sacred ground. That was the first time I was not an afterthought. I was not part of an affinity group, and it's just amazing. And just seeing the continued inequalities and how the system is set up and it's working just like it is, right? 1 out of 3 African-American men will be under the control of the criminal justice system at some point in their lifetime. We could talk about housing disparities. We could look at COVID and that disparity. We could look at generational wealth, and everything is working just as it should, as it's set up. And I think really the Navy is what established and set me up to kind of right some of the wrongs that I see. And at least in my mind, try to educate people. Because like you said, I get the people who say, well, it wasn't me, but no, it wasn't you, but you're benefiting. You know, I mean, your privilege, your skin is benefiting. It's not saying your life hasn't been hard because you're white, but it's saying the color of your skin surely isn't one of the attributes that is making it hard. So I believe that journey in the Navy and it just really opened my eyes to the systemic issues we have in society, because the military is just an ecosystem of our society. So experiencing that racism by other sailors when we're told, well, we're all blue, because at that point we wore dungarees, but finding out that that's not at all the case. You know, it's very much based on, at least the squadron I was in, was very racialized. And after that experience, I think that is what has led me to the journey to really try to work to create social justice and to call out the continued disparities based on a social construct such as race.
You know, and again, some more powerful statements. You know, a lot of times when we think about racism, we simply look at personal racism, individuals and their acts of racial slaughter or racial slaughter. But, you know, you mentioned systemic, you've mentioned institutional, you've mentioned structural. And so when you look at putting all that together, from personal to systemic to structural to institutional, it is a construct. Something was constructed, something was created purposely for us to have to deal with, and for the BIPOC community to be in an inferior status, and to have to try to climb out of a hole that keeps getting deeper and deeper, or was not created for individuals to come out of. But we've made some progress, and some things have happened, and people are moving. And you mentioned the hurdle and challenge of the Navy, and you know, being called the N-word, and things being kind of overt, and that kind of birthed a passion in you. I think sometimes, Dr. Hodo, entertainment, especially the music industry, the movie industry, probably sports, they kind of throw a veil over what's really taking place in America and the opportunities, because we see these possibly rich and even affluent people of color. We see folk who have made it. They're doing well. They've got a lot of money. And we forget that that is a very, very, very small population. But because of TV and technology and the advancement of technology, we see we're in their lives on a consistent basis. We see the wives of Atlanta. We see the wives of LA. We see all these things, and it looks like, well, black folk done made it. They ain't got nothing to talk about. They doing well. They making shows and they're on TV. But there's millions of individuals who are suffering daily just due to the injustice, the inequity, the inequality that seems to be prevalent in our community. So the question I ask is, why is this work that you're doing vital?
Because I want to see change. And I know that change can come, but it's going to require us to work together. And I think that there's a system in play to keep us divided, and it's working well. You know, and reality is if you think of Bacon's Rebellion, where poor white people and the slaves got together and they began to challenge the elite, that you know, that's when race really became, you know, something that mattered, because it was like, hey, but you're still better than them. Even though you're poor, you're better than them. You know, and I often think that a lot of low income white people cut their nose off to spite their face, when reality, like Martin Luther King had it right with the poor man's campaign, is that we have a lot of white people who are low income and they vote against their own interests. You know, and it's just it's so hard for me to understand, because the reality is if we came together and we did it based on social class and stopped looking at that social construct, what type of power could we have as a society? But that 1 or 2% wants to continue to be in charge, and so they manipulate the system, and that's exactly what happens, and people fall right in line. You know, and like you said, we see, you know, and I often think people don't realize, like, it's okay for us to be in certain positions for entertainment, sports, comedians, things like that's always historically been okay with a lot of even white supremacists in America. And that's kind of like our place. But when you talk about academics and you know, entrepreneurs and doing other things, you know, changing lives with you know, with your institute, going out and making these real world changes, a lot of people don't want to see that. You know, they just don't realize how important that type of work is.
And that's a blessing to just hear you talk about, because you want to see change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times we get information and we don't know what to do with it. But organizations like your own, that does a lot of the training, that's dedicated to action. When you read your bio, that's what it says. It's dedicated to action, and that's amazing. And but it starts with these kind of conversations, these critical conversations that people are having trouble having. They are. Turns into an argument where nothing gets done, or we have the debates where we can't agree on what needs to be done next, and not understanding that there's a strategy. Any way to destruct, construct, is there has to be a strategy. I was watching them knock a building down not too long ago in Jacksonville, and they put the gate out, and everybody was there, and it's a huge building, and it had been an eyesore for a while. And of course, I've seen it done before, but I thought to myself, wow, there has been a 2-year planning period to knock a building down. Mm-hmm. And just to knock it down, don't want one stone left, just going to be completely dilapidated. So what strategy has to go into making sure that as we diffuse a construct, or we get rid of a construct, that there's something that we can build upon that's there? Or are we working to knock it all the way down? What is the strategy? What does someone like you say in a room that when the question comes, okay, Dr. Tammy, what do we do?
Yeah, we have to deconstruct it. So reality is that our society was built on systemic racism, and that was intentional. And in order to do that, though, we have to have those uncomfortable conversations. And too often, I find a lot of European Americans, they're so fragile, and that white fragility is very real. And like you said, well, I didn't do that. I understand that you didn't do that, but we need your help to deconstruct this. The reality is that you're benefiting from it. And too often people don't want to do that. So we need to have the hard conversations. We need to deconstruct the social construct of race, and look to build like social justice. Recognize that equality and equity are not the same. Equality is assuming we're all starting at the same vantage point, where equity is recognizing justice and fairness, and we're not starting at the same level. So if you look at like the generational wealth, African Americans hold about 12% of what Caucasians hold. Hispanics hold about 19% of what Caucasians hold. But then let's talk about housing covenants, redlining, realtor steering. And it's like, so we have to deconstruct all these institutional policies as well as practices in order to make things equitable. When Lincoln freed the slaves, he gave them equality. He didn't give them equity.
That's right.
All they did was release them. And what about reparations? I mean, our indigenous brothers and sisters who experienced genocide, the ones that survived, they did get some land back, even though often it's been overproduced and it doesn't grow anything, but they've gotten something. Our Japanese brothers and sisters who were in internment camps got something. And we lived in Europe for quite some time, and there's like no statues to Adolf Hitler. There's no Third Reich schools, so we really need to look at our systems we have in play and the structures and the policies, and we need to deconstruct those and go through them, looking at them from a Jedi, right? Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion lens. And then I think we can begin. But again, having those conversations, and people need to stop shutting down. No one's attacking you. It's not about sympathy. It's not about guilt. It's about education, enlightenment, and empathy. And that's where we as human beings really need to be focused. And that doesn't tend to happen, I find, a lot.
I'm always amazed at the individuals when you can be pro-Jewish, you can be pro-Arabian, you can be, in some cases, pro-African, mm-hmm. but to be pro-Black is almost like, why? Mm-hmm. Why do you need to be pro-Black? And for me to be pro-Black doesn't make me, anti-white. Exactly. Those of us that are Christian and diverse sometimes still grapple with that. And I say, well, Paul said, I want to see my people. He understood that. And what's wrong with that? Why don't we want to see change? Why don't we want to see empowerment with our people? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I've said to many of my brothers of another mother that it's not okay to not be racist. It's time for us to be against racism. Mm-hmm. And we need those individuals who are not Black, who are not people of color, to stand up strong where they have places of affluence and influence and say this cannot be tolerated anymore, because that's when we're going to begin to see real change. We're going to see real change when our brothers that are Caucasian are willing to say that we will no longer tolerate this activity. And so the education, the inspiration is for sure. Well, listen, I still got you on the burner for a couple of things, but I'm going to switch it up for a second. We're going to play this beautiful game that I called I Say, You Say. And you can, it's meant for like one word transfers, but it doesn't have to be that. If you need to say a phrase, if you need to give an explanation, you feel free to do that. But I'm going to throw a word out or a small phrase out, and then you shoot back at me, and then we'll get back to the podcast. All right? So okay. Here we go. I say, you say. I should have some music playing right there. That's going to be some good stuff. We'll work that out down the road. All right, so here we go. Diversity.
Equity.
U.S. Navy.
Bad experience.
Family.
Love.
Delta Sigma Theta.
My sorority.
Black history.
American history.
Friendship.
Important.
Justice.
Now.
Civil rights.
Continuum.
Education.
Imperative.
Prayer and worship.
Imperative.
Imperative. All right. Well, that was I Say, You Say. You did a wonderful job. You were ready, and you didn't know what was coming, and I appreciate that. And so you had to do a little background on you. You had to come find out that the red and white was in your blood.
Oh, yeah. I love Delta. Now, Bishop, I do have to say, and I loved when you spoke about our brothers and sisters from another mother. Reality is allyship is a verb. It's an action verb. So like with, HB7 within Florida, right? We have our governor that wants to basically ban any conversation surrounding diversity, bias. Right. He wants us to believe that everything's based on meritocracy, But, there are people who are actually suing the governor, but I don't see a lot of allies on that. So what I see a lot is a lot of talking, but right. Allyship is an action verb. So you need to put your name on that paper as a plaintiff when you're looking at doing things and come out and speak out against it instead of always behind the keyboard. And I see so much of that taking place. And I moved here from the capital of the Confederacy. And I would have to say that there, our allies were much more actively engaged in action. Here, I see lots of talk, but not much action.
Not much action. And for someone like yourself that's dedicated to action, for a person like myself that believes this conversation should cultivate action, we're probably going to be some thorns in some people's sides for some years to come. But again, it's not to create a war, but it's to bring peace to what should have been. Mm-hmm. And it's to bring us to a space where there should be some recognition, even in the reparation of truth. Sometimes I believe if you can't give me money, give me truth. Mm-hmm. I mean, why? What's the problem with the critical race theory? What's the problem with us bringing real history into our historical classes? Mm-hmm. What's wrong with social studies, including some of the things that took place socially in America, so that real truth is there, so the next generation of BIPOC and non-BIPOC individuals will know truth and can make a choice on how they want to approach each other and deal with things in America, versus being indoctrinated with a lie or with part of the truth and believing that this is still the way things are. I was amazed. I hear people talk. Bishop McLaughlin talks about when he went to college that his college roommate actually thought that Black people had tails. And so you hear little things like that, you think, oh man, that's crazy. And then when you find out that there are realities, I'm always amazed when I was growing up, and even now, when someone says to me things like, "Oh wow, you're articulate,"
That microaggression. You don't like that microaggression because people who look like us, we speak Ebonics. We don't know how to speak proper English. And so you're so articulate is one of those common microaggressions we get.
And it almost makes me want to go back to the hood. Yo, what's happening, man? And throw a little bit of that out there to just get you off of me, because I don't want to be your trophy. I don't want to be that token friendship that you have and be able to say, well, yeah, I've got a black friend. And because I fit your conform, and I fit your construct of what an individual needs to be. All right. So as we get ready for the last part of this, where do you think we are politically in the United States of America?
I'm afraid. In true transparency, I'm looking at becoming an expat. I don't know if we'll remain in this country after what happened January 6th, and being a disabled veteran, married to a retired, disabled veteran, and knowing that Confederate flag had never flown or been in the rotunda. After seeing that, I don't know, what's going to happen here after seeing, just the continued level of mass hate crimes committed against, particular groups, BIPOC. Politically, I think that we are in danger of losing our democracy. I believe that we have some people who are so far out there, they believe these conspiracy theories. I think that we need to have some term limits in Congress. I'm just very concerned, and just in full transparency, am looking at maybe leaving because I don't know. I think of Josephine Baker, Richard Wright, W.E.B. Du Bois, all these other people at the same, similar pivotal point with the Black Lives Matter movement. They were the civil rights movement. They got so disgusted with the lack of implementation of change or the slow process that they left. And I'm not sure, and I'm concerned about our democracy. January 6th really shook me. The mere fact that people could get into the building like that and do what they did. And I'm not seeing the type of consequences that I believe there should be. But again, that goes with white privilege, because I know if it had been me, if it had been you standing, and doing that same thing, we probably would be deceased. We have not had in America racial healing or reconciliation. South Africa has. In Germany, they recognize and teach the correct history about the Third Reich and Hitler. We don't want to do that. We want to act like everything's just fine. We put blinders on, but that doesn't make the problem go away. So politically, I'm afraid about our democracy. I don't know if we can withstand another president like we previously had, who just his hateful rhetoric, and people internalized that and they began to express it. And I just always say I want to get this shirt that says "Try Jesus, not me," because I'm just not the one, And so politically, I don't know. I'm very worried. I pray for our president, because I believe if something were to happen to him, that they would burn this country down. The hate that is so filled in this country before they let a woman of color become the president and then Pelosi become the vice president. So again, I'm fearful. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was. You look at you mentioned some things that sometimes you don't want to talk about, or people don't want to hear you talk about, and we don't want to say the what ifs. But I think sometimes we have to visit some of those spaces to just really get a glimpse of where we are. There's no question to me that over hours of a span of time, would there have been an allowable climbing of a wall by a group of BIPOC individuals who had no good intention with that edifice? I just don't believe that those people would have been arrested. I don't believe that they would have been, waited till they came down. I believe there would have been a carpet of bodies at the foot of that wall. I couldn't imagine myself making it through a rotunda, getting into some hallways and office space where I then would be comfortable enough to take a picture at someone's desk with my feet up and their documents in my hand. I just don't believe I would have had that comfortability, nor would have walked out of there. I believe that all lives matter. I love everyone. I want to see everyone get to heaven. I'm just confused on how these mass shootings in certain cases end up with someone being spoken to and walked away from the scene. We just know that would not have happened. We just know that once you knew that I was shooting, reloaded, shot some more. I'm appalled that the 911 worker hung up the phone, and you hear someone on the phone. I listened to the interview a few times to see if I could sense some ethnicity in her conversation, what they would, be able to get some voice recognition in there. A couple of little slurs that I thought, yep, she probably sounded a little black, and someone hung up. When we've seen and heard stories where people have been very concerned about things that are of much less danger, and so it's very concerning. And the things that you talk about with the Confederacy and the statues, and here in Florida, Lord, I've never seen it like this before, but I had to remember where I was, and this was a port, and and even in Jacksonville in particular, you're kind of in southern Georgia, and so you just kind of get an understanding of where we are. So Ukraine and Russia, is there any, how do we get that to stop? What can we do? What can we say? What needs to be instituted in all of your work and all of our time? We've seen some amazing things taking place in our lifetime with COVID, and then even now with Ukraine and Russia, and just the crushing evil that seems to be going through the leaders' minds. What do we do?
I think that, Russia has gotten very comfortable. I think that our last president ensured them that comfortability. And I think that they're, going to do some ethnic cleansing and land grabbing, and so we see genocide, and it's like NATO has to step in and do something. It should not just be something that we do as a country, but this should be a collective action to stop this from taking place. I believe that he needs to be put on notice, that this is not going to fare well. The sanctions is just not enough. We're seeing videos now of soldiers being killed, Ukraine soldiers and things like that. And something just has to give. And I think that it's going to take many nations in order to do that. I don't think that it is just our job to police other nations. I think that we need others on board.
And I think it goes back to the words you used before, which is a part of our acronym, alliances or allies. And they have to be active allies. They have to be individuals who want to move in the power that they have and create change. All right. So Justice in America, final words, next steps. And as we contact All Things Diverse, as we get in touch with Dr. Tammy Hodo, what should we be ready to embark upon, or what should we be ready to engage within?
Some courageous conversations, some classes about allyship, some classes about being actively engaged versus a passive bystander, conversations about racial healing and reconciliation, because that's what we need. And just a lot of conversation and some action items that people are actually willing to do. A lot of times I find that some European or white Americans believe this is a zero-sum game. It's not that. As I gain more equity, or it doesn't take away from you. And I think we need people to understand that. So we need to deconstruct these structures that are continually perpetuating this inequality that we see. And we need to have those conversations, and we need to develop some new policies and procedures that are actually equitable, that are not, more leaning towards cisgender, white males, And so I think that's really where we need to start, is having some racial healing and reconciliation. We need to go ahead and deconstruct these structures and these policies, and we need to go ahead and engage in those conversations about making an equitable society.
That's awesome. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot. Theoretically, I'm putting together a group of individuals graduating from an HBCU, individuals who are returning citizens, individuals who have just shortly come out of some rehab facilities from drug use, and individuals who are still a part of some neighborhood, I'm going to say non-diverse neighborhoods that are pretty systemically poor, and full of blight. And what we see when we call it the hood, or when we call it the project areas. However, there's been a shift in them that says we can do more, we can be better, we can be greater, but we just don't know what to do. We need some direction. I've sat them down in a coliseum. You've got a couple of minutes to inspire them. What would you say?
I would talk to them about entrepreneurship. And Bishop, forgive me, if you've been a drug dealer, you know business, you know marketing, you know security, you know finance. I mean, I would talk with them about entrepreneurship. I know there are a lot of opportunities that they're lacking because people don't want to give them second chances when it comes to careers. But that's what I would inspire them to do, would be to become entrepreneurs, and then to share their journey and their experiences with the masses, so that we don't have other kids falling behind them in those same footsteps, and just share, how they got to where they are, what they've learned, how not to do that, and then focus on entrepreneurship, and then giving back and impacting our community, recognizing that oftentimes it's low income blighted areas. But, going back and showing these kids some of the same skill sets and engaging with them to make sure that they don't choose that same path.
And what would you say to those young people in the HBCU that are getting a little frustrated, that have to take out grants? What would you say to them about education and the importance of our elevation as it relates to education?
B.B. King, I think it was, said, education is the only thing no one can take away from you. And that's so true, because
Wow.
you can feel any type of way you want to about me, but I'm educated. I am HBCU educated. This is your only opportunity where you will not be an afterthought. You are on sacred ground. Just relish in it, enjoy it, appreciate it, and know that those connections you're making at that HBCU, you're going to have doctors, lawyers, congressmen and women, judges, all kind of connections. And that's what it's about. But again, just enjoy it, and recognize education is something, no matter what, no one can take away.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have been honored. Of course, this won't be the last time. We're going to find a way to get back on our schedule. Dr. Tammy Hodo, the founder and president of All Things Diverse LLC. This has been an amazing conversation for me, for us who are going to be listening. And we're just excited for the friendship, for the mentorship, for the relationship. And I thank God for you. And I look forward to all the things that All Things Diverse are going to do in the state of Florida and around the world. And for as long as you're not an expat, America is going to be better with you in it. And if you become one, then we're going to glean from afar, and we will have an international bridge that will allow us to continue to pull on who you are and what you are aspiring to change in America. And I thank God for you. I appreciate you, your family, your worship, your prayer life, and just the fact that you were unapologetically a Christian, and you said that, and that's powerful for us. And a strong Black woman for sure, a strong woman for sure. And thank you for your transparency about your upbringing and your mother's role in your life. And but I think one of those things that my mother used to always remind me is that your upbringing and your history is a part of who you are. And if you're ashamed of it, then you're ashamed of what you're becoming. Mm-hmm. And so we're very thankful that you are proud of that, and we appreciate you sharing it. Ladies and gentlemen, allthingsdiverse.com. Dr. Tammy Hodo, any last statement, anything last that you didn't get to say, I didn't ask?
Well, no, Bishop, I just want to say I appreciate the work that you're doing, because you're going into the environment where we need the change to happen, and we need our young folk to know that there is opportunity. We have too many kids who just don't see a future. So I appreciate you. I pray for you, and I thank you for the work that you're doing, because you're making a difference as well. And it's so important that our youth know there are opportunities, that they do have a future.
Well, once again, thank you so much. God bless you. To all that are listening, and then some that will get to watch, we want to thank you for being part of the Who Cares About Justice podcast. Man, this has been great. This has been exciting for me. I am so thankful. This Sunday, May 29th, we will shoot this out. It'll be my birthday. That's right. It's my birthday. It's my birthday. I'll be 54 years young, and I'm excited and thankful that God has allowed me to hang around, to meet people like Dr. Tammy Hodo, to be in a situation that I'm in, for my wife and I to be the founders of the CARES Justice Institute, and be a part of the work here in Jacksonville, Florida, and Dayton, Ohio, Montgomery County, and just around the world. And so we're thankful. We are thankful for Bishop Vaughn and Lady Narlene McLaughlin of the Potter's House here in Jacksonville, Florida, for giving us platforms and opportunities to expand and to become. And so we're just thankful. Ultimately, we're thankful to God. For his son, Jesus Christ, for the blood that was shed, his resurrection power that resides in us. And we're also thankful for you. Why? Because you've been a part of this conversation. And remember, the conversation is going to cultivate action and power. You've got some information today. We're going to get you more. Dr. Hodo and others will be back, and they'll give us some statistics and some numbers and some things that we can grab hold onto and to move forward in our local areas. Because here's the deal. Find out what you can do, and then do that. We can't do everything, and everyone's not expected to do the same thing, but there's something that you can do, and we want to see you doing it. We want to see you in action. So once again, thank you for tuning in to the Who Cares About Justice podcast of the CARES Justice Institute. You can find us at caresjustice.org. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CARES Justice, and we're just excited to be a part of the change that you're going to help us make. We need your story. We need people to hear it. We need people who are not a part of the BIPOC community to become our strong allies. Remember, it's the Community Alliance for Restorative Education and Social Justice Institute Incorporated. This is your guy, Mark C. McGuire Sr. I'm signing off for the month of May. Remember, April showers bring May flowers, so bloom and blossom where you've been planted. All right, God bless you. Peace.